Fabiana Rosales, the wife of Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido, met with President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence at the White House. Now, this comes as Trump issued a statement saying the Russian government an ultimatum, demanding Russia withdraw any military personnel from Venezuela. In quotes, Russia has to get out, the president said, saying all options are on the table if the support troops who are there at the request of President Nicolas Maduro do not leave. Now, Guaido's wife, Rosales, claims armed groups associated with the Maduro government are trying to kill her husband. Today, the opposition in Guyana submitted an appeal with the Caribbean Court of Justice. They want to reverse a Court of Appeal decision that says the no-confidence motion passed against the Guyanese government is not legitimate. Joining us now to explain what's happening in Guyana and why it actually matters a lot here in the U.S. is RT correspondent Michelle Greenstein. Thank you so much for joining us, Michelle. It's your debut here on News Views and News. Thank you for joining us. I wanted to bring you on with this story because nobody really is covering it, and yet it really is going to have an impact on our military and as well as our political advancement in Venezuela and why we're involved in Venezuela. So let's just start off. Where is Guyana?
I think that's exactly the question to be asking, and I brought a map along to illustrate just that. And this is why it's very important to the story that you actually just led with about Venezuela. So Guyana actually borders Venezuela as well as Brazil and Suriname. Let's take a look at this map here. So even though people from Guyana actually call themselves Caribbean, it's actually not an island. There it is right there. But what's basically really interesting about this story is that there's a border dispute between Venezuela and Guyana that's actually been happening since the 1800s. At the time, the country was controlled by Great Britain and they couldn't agree on where their border was. But that dispute actually just fell to the wayside after it was discovered that the International Court was colluding with Great Britain. But now that dispute has actually been reopened in recent years because ExxonMobil made an announcement after Guyana gave it a contract to explore for oil in Guyana. It discovered about 4 or 5 billion barrels, and that's enough to change the economy of this country, which is, of course, relatively small when compared to that of Venezuela. In response to Exxon making this announcement of this oil discovery, Venezuela issued a statement actually asserting ownership of 2/3 of the land of Guyana as well as some of the waters that Guyana claims as well. Now, Venezuela said it was willing to negotiate, but they also established this military zone. Essentially, they're essentially challenging the claim that Guyana has to these oil fields. Now, what's really interesting about this oil discovery is that this oil is different than the heavy crude that we've come to talk a lot about on the news when it comes to Venezuela. Venezuelan crude, it's a hard commodity to come by, but it takes a lot of refining and certifying, whereas the oil that's been discovered in this disputed territory is very high quality and it's very light. So this would be a very, very important commodity for international oil companies. Now, of course, what's notable here is that, you know, Chavez and now the Maduro government, these are governments that actually nationalized a lot of oil fields, including some that Exxon used to lay claim to. So what's happening now is that Venezuela is challenging the Guyanese government, whose oil is in control by U.S. oil corporations, and saying, hey, no, this is ours again, this dispute is being reopened, and that's why I think it's important to look at what's happening in this country. So this vote of no confidence that just happened in December, just like to add to what you said before, in January, the High Court of the country said that this was valid, and then the Court of Appeals, like you mentioned, said that that no confidence motion was not valid. So essentially what happens next in this country is something we need to pay attention to, because there is the possibility of martial law. If the people in this country don't, you know, agree that this government represents them and that they don't want another election because these elections don't represent them, then what's happening on this border will have huge, huge implications.
Absolutely. And the court overturned a ruling of an elected official that the court said shouldn't have ever been able to run for office because he was paid millions of dollars in U.S. dollars of bribe money, basically swearing his allegiance to the United States. Therefore, he was not swearing his allegiance to his own country. Therefore, he should never have been allowed to be in Parliament in the first place. Thank you for following us, because once again, we might be finding the real intentions of why the U.S. is so much involved in the Venezuelan process.
There's a real
right
prize in that disputed territory.
And it's always the second or third layer we find out possibly the truth as to why we're there. Thank you so much for joining us, Michelle.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.